Hi listeners, Jason here. This episode is another treat from PHSCON 2024. It is the live recording we did with Professor Christina Maslach from her home in California through the magic of the internet. Despite being a virtual interview, it was a highlight of the conference for many who attended in person. Make sure you don't miss PHSCON 2025 in June this year when we return to Sydney and have many local and international speakers and industry case studies. We'll also be doing live podcast episodes with Adam Grant, the one and only, and Professor Rob Briner of the UK. Early bird pricing is available for a limited time, so get in quick to secure discounted tickets for the conference, pre-conference masterclasses, and the VIP dinner. Now, on to this episode.
From Flourish DX, this is the Psych Health and Safety podcast. With workplace mental health becoming a safety prerogative, this is the source of information on psychological injury prevention and health promotion.
Hi, welcome to the Psych Health and Safety podcast. My name is Jason Schie and I'm one of the hosts of the show. The aim of the podcast is to rapidly increase the knowledge and application of psychological health and safety in workplaces worldwide. To help with this, we have regular guests from around the world who are leading the way in this important area. But before I introduce our guest and topic for today, allow me to introduce my co-host, Joelle Mitchell. How are you today, Joelle?
I'm still tired. I think I'm just catching up on the sleep that was missed the previous couple of nights.
Yeah, that was a big day yesterday.
Yesterday was a very big day, long day, lots going on. Got to meet lots of people in person who I feel like I've known for a really long time, but never seen them in three dimensions before.
Yeah, it's hard. And if I look at you vaguely and go, I feel like I know that person, but I cannot put a name to that. It's very different seeing people in 2D and their LinkedIn photos and that sort of thing, and then meeting them in 3D. So please let me know if I have a vague expression on my face.
Yes, definitely. And got to meet lots of new people as well, which was fantastic.
Yeah.
As well as the excellent content that we had all day yesterday. So it's a big day. It was a good day.
And I believe you got a big hug from Anna Faringa.
I got a big hug from so many people.
And Anna mentioned to me at the dinner last night, she had not realised or remembered until she gave you that hug that you're not a hugger.
I say this with a little bit of trepidation, but I'm actually fine with hugs. It's you who doesn't like to hug me.
Yeah.
Probably appropriate.
Yeah, I know. I guess because of the nature of our work.
In general, I'm okay with being hugged.
I don't know, I'm a bit fearful of getting that close as well.
Well, that's a you problem, not a me problem. You should own that yourself, Jason.
I probably
Put it on
should
me.
own it. Yeah, we've got some people on our team that can help me work through that. So
I feel like you should probably outsource that to someone who doesn't depend on you for their income.
Potentially, yeah. Now, yesterday though, you were pretty excited, I believe. I think Mira had a photo of you celebrating something.
I don't know what that was.
Yeah, but that was before the day started.
That was. I think I was doing a sarcastic thing, and then she was like, "Do it again. Let me take a photo." So I just hammed it up.
So I should never let Mira take photos of you.
This is true, Mira. Yeah.
I did
Talk
promise
later.
that she would not be harmed by doing that. So
You shouldn't make promises that you can't keep, Jason.
this is true. All right. Anyway, we have an amazing guest who's just waiting there all the way in California. So we should probably get her in.
Probably, yeah.
Okay. All right. So Liz has done a fair bit of an introduction already. So let me just do an abbreviated introduction for our amazing guest today. She received her AB from Harvard and her PhD from Stanford. She's been honoured with multiple awards, both academic and public, including an award from the National Academy of Sciences for Scientific Reviewing and Business Insider's 2021 list of the top 100 people transforming business. She is best known as the pioneering researcher on job burnout, along with Michael Leiter, producing the standard assessment tool, the Maslach Burnout Inventory, as well as many peer-reviewed journal articles and books and everything else. A very warm welcome to the podcast, Christina Maslach. Thanks for joining us, Christina. How are you today?
I'm doing fine. Thank you.
Yeah, amazing. Great. Thank you for sending Michael over to us yesterday.
Good. Yeah.
We had a great time with him yesterday, both during the day and those that were lucky enough to attend the dinner as well last night. But we're really looking forward to having a chat with you today. And again, we really wanted Christina to join us here in person as well. Unfortunately, just because of the way the world is, couldn't get her across, but hopefully this virtual does it justice.
It would be nice to be in Australia again. I would look forward to it. So maybe another time.
Yeah, 2025 or 2026, I reckon.
So, Christina, I normally ask our guests about podcasts that they've been listening to. I understand that that's not your thing. Is there an interesting book or paper that you've been reading lately?
Actually, I enjoy reading different books, but a new one just arrived today, and I'm especially thrilled about it because it was written by my husband, Philip Zimbardo, and his co-author of many years on psychology textbooks. And so I've started reading it. It's really fascinating. It's, I don't know if you can see this, Psychology According to Shakespeare. And they do, it turns out Shakespeare anticipated a lot of modern psychology in many, many ways. And they go through and do some very interesting, fascinating analyses of all of this, and come up with things that, when you think about it, said, oh, well, if I've read some Shakespeare, I kind of remember that, but hadn't thought about it as psychology in the same way. But so that's the one I'm reading this morning.
Yeah, fascinating. If you get a sudden uptick in sales in Australia,
right.
You'll know that was
First to hear. Okay.
Christina, please tell us about your professional career.
Well, you've already heard that where I went to college and graduate school. And after I got my PhD, I was offered a job at the University of California, Berkeley, starting in 1971. So I've been there ever since, and have sort of officially retired from doing teaching there, but am still involved in a number of organizations on campus, including the Healthy Workplaces Center, which is relevant for this. And so I live in San Francisco. My husband would teach at Stanford. We were sort of in between the two campuses and managed to raise a family of 2 daughters as well. And, so that's basically my career. By the time COVID came along, we were both retired and working from home already. So it didn't impact us in quite the same way as it did some other people who were still on the job.
It was a very elevator pitch version of what I'm sure was actually a very long and complex career, Christina.
If you want to go into more details, just tell me which one you want to hear about. So,
yeah, over such a distinguished career, I'm sure you got lots of stories, but we'd love to know what you're doing currently, Christina. So is there any research projects you're currently doing?
Not really in that sense of doing research studies. I'm on a different project entirely, in some ways, where I'm doing interviews with women like myself who joined the higher education institutions in the 1970s after the women faculty really plummeted. It almost became extinct during the 1960s in the United States. And so trying to understand from everybody with a different department, different, path to that, kind of what it was like in those times. So that's a different project. With regard to burnout, I think the biggest commitment for me now is how do we translate how much we know from research, not just mine and Michael's and everybody on burnout, but the larger field of occupational health. There is much that we know, but is still not understood and is not being practiced. And so how do we translate, what we've found out about that really would make a difference into, make that translation from research into, reality within the workplace. And so for me, how to, it's part of the reason to write the book. It's part of the reason for talking to different organizations and working with different organizations, consulting and so forth, to try and see, can we make a little more progress on that translation and actually use the knowledge that we've gained, to make the world a better place.
Terrific. So is the output then, did you say, going to be a book as a result of that?
Well, there was a book which just came out, and which you have, I think.
Oh, the Burnout Challenge. Oh, sorry, I thought you meant you were going to be producing another book on the back of these interviews that you've had.
No, well, a book about women. That wasn't about burnout. That was about professional careers for women in academia. And would there be a book later? Maybe. But I haven't gotten there yet. Still talking. Um, but yeah, so burnout was something that I never knew about, heard about. It was something that was totally, I stumbled upon it by accident. So it's the beginnings for me were very serendipitous. It wasn't anything that I sort of planned, but it turned out in a very interesting way.
So can you tell us a bit more about that, Christine? What inspired you to focus on burnout, or what was it that drew your attention to burnout?
Um, I don't think it was that I was inspired or I decided to work on burnout. In a sense, burnout found me, as it was, and then it was kind of like, wow, what's going on here? I had been trained as a social psychologist, experimental one, laboratory one at Stanford, and did a lot of research on emotions and how we understand what we feel and how we cope with, really strong feelings sometimes when they're not really helpful or sort of getting in the way. There's an emergency all around you and you've got to be calm, cool, and, figure out what to do. So when I got to Berkeley, turned out there wasn't a lab ready for me to do more of the research that I had been doing. So I had some ideas that I wanted to explore. And I thought, well, while I'm waiting for that, I'll go out and actually, why don't I interview people who really encounter these kinds of situations in their workplace and get a better sense of their experience and, develop hypotheses about what it is that I would want to study. So I started interviewing people, and then each of them would sometimes refer me to somebody else. So somebody was working, physician in the ER, and he would say, you know what? I know a psychiatric social worker over here, and you really ought to talk to her. And so I ended up talking and interviewing a lot of people who were primarily what we now call first responders, during the pandemic, but a lot of people working in human services, health services, and so forth. And they would answer my questions, but often they would say, "Can I tell you some more about this that you haven't asked me?" And I would say, "Yeah, sure, why not?" And they would start talking more about their experience. And after a while, I realized that this was really important. I mean, people would cry while they were doing it. They would get angry while they were describing things. It really meant a lot. They were really getting a sort of emotionally caught up. And after a while, I realized I was hearing a rhythm, a theme to these stories, no matter where they came from different people, different occupations. And I kind of would start asking a little bit more about this thing. And they often didn't have a name for it or wouldn't talk about it. They thought they would be stigmatized and drummed out of the profession if anybody knew that they felt someday like their clients should just drop off the end of the earth and they don't want to hear another problem again, or whatever. And I was trying at the end of the interview would say, well, in psychology or sociology or whatever, there's this concept like detached concern or dehumanizing other people as a protective self-defense. Does that kind of capture any of what you're telling? Well, not exactly. I don't know, whatever. And then the second serendipitous thing that happened is I went to a university dinner for all the newbies at Berkeley, kind of welcome to the campus. And we're chatting during the dinner. And I mentioned to a woman sitting next to me some of the things I had heard in the interview that day. And she looked at me and she said, "Oh my God, I don't know what you guys call it, but in law, poverty law, legal services, where I just came from, we call it burnout." So I thought, that's kind of interesting. And then I'd use that in the next interviews at the end. Detached concern, no. What about burnout? Yes, that's it. That's it. And there was this reaction of like, yeah, that captures what, had the flames and the power and the whatever and the stressors and the stuff. And now it's gone and ashes and all the rest of it. So I just sort of stuck with that term because people responded so much to it. And I have to say, I had heard the term before from my dad, who was an engineer doing work that was important for the space program at that time. And so rocket boosters would burn out as it's, taking rockets up into outer space. And light bulbs burn out and ball bearings burn out. And so the concept, just like the concept of stress, which came from physics, engineering, being applied to the human experience, I started first hearing that from Silicon Valley, which was in its formative stage at that point. And they would advertise as burnout shops. This is where the concept of we own you 24/7, you come in and work all the time when we call. And by the couple years, you'll be burned out, can't do anything anymore, and you'll be gone. But you'll have stock options, and hopefully you'll get rich from this thing that we're trying to invent that will be really great. So that notion of the burnout shop is very much what we see as the workplace culture today in a lot of different organizations and cultures. So I think that's because the term burnout, existed before. How it got attached to the workplace and that kind of 24/7, do it all mentality is has got, I think, an interesting history.
Well, Christina, all I can say is how fortunate it was that the university hadn't got their act together and got that lab ready for you.
Right. I got it eventually, but still.
And it's funny how topics find us. I remember vividly in third year psychology myself, starting to think about, do I go into clinical psychology or sports psychology or something like that? And I had some exposure to clinical psychology, just working with a suicide helpline. I was like, no, that's not for me. Like, I'm not going down the clinical psychology route. And in my work experience, dealt with human factors and other organizational psychology topics like selection and that sort of thing. But mental health found me as well. I was not interested in the topic at all, but I saw there was a need to approach it in a different way. So it's funny how things find us, and we're all very fortunate that burnout found you and the lab wasn't ready for you, like Joelle said.
I know. Right. But it wasn't until, I started doing work. I couldn't get published at first. Um, the interviews, nobody kind of, well, it's not what burnout. Really only 1% of people, really, it's probably not very common and so forth. And it wasn't until I happened to meet a woman who was a freelance journalist. And we were talking about things, and she said, "Wow, this really sounds interesting. Are you writing articles or and things?" And I said, "I can't. I'm submitting it to journals, and they send it back saying we don't publish pop psychology." And she said, "Well, why don't you write it for a popular magazine? Get to the people who you actually talk to, and do that." So I wrote my first article, was published in the mid 70s in a magazine called Human Behavior, which kind of covered broadly social sciences, not just psychology. And they liked the article so much they made cover art, a matchbook with, one match painted to look like a nurse and another one like a police officer and another one, like et cetera. Um, and starting to burn, and then eventually throughout the article getting completely burned out. And that article, in today's language, because this was snail mail before the internet, it went viral. I got sacks and sacks of mail and people knocking on my door and phoning me up saying, "Oh my God, I thought I was the only one. Let me tell you my story," and then it was incredible. And it was kind of like touching a raw nerve and saying, "Oh my gosh, what is this?" And so later I eventually was able to develop the measure, and for that I had to thank my colleague in psychology Berkeley, Harrison Goff, who was the leading person on developing assessment tests of psychological characteristics, personality, or whatever. And I had never learned that skill in graduate school. So he and my graduate student, Susan Jackson, worked together. He just said, "Here's what you have to do. You have to, get this kind of data. You have to talk to people who know this person, get a kind of 360 view of them. You have to pull this all together and, develop a way now to assess what people are thinking about and how they're reacting to their workplace." So that's what we did for a number of years and eventually published the measure in 1981. And then once that measure was published, then it began to attract the attention of other people to do research with it. And then, it really broadened out to other people getting on board to look at it. And then it was possible to submit articles and get them reviewed, and hopefully published as well.
So, Christina, you mentioned when you first started thinking about the topic of burnout and you spoke with some colleagues that you anticipated maybe 1% of people might be experiencing what you now refer to as burnout. I've seen estimates anywhere between, 10% up to over 60% of the workforce around the world experiencing burnout. Can we go direct to the source? What do you think is the best estimate of how many people are actually experiencing
Burnout. I wish I could give you a more definitive answer, but quite frankly, the way people measure or assess how many people are experiencing burnout is not by using a standardized measure, is by asking the question in umpteen different ways. So, and they'll just say, so do you think you've experienced burnout? And some people will say yes, and others will say no, but we don't know really what they're assuming burnout is all about, because the word is popular. It gets attached to all kinds of things. I hear midlife crisis burnout, or parent burnout, or marriage burnout, or Chardonnay burnout. I mean, we get these words, these other concepts, and burnout means something negative, and it used to be better maybe, and now it's not. And that's about the only sort of semblance of, a common sort of thing on it. So it's a little hard to say. What Michael and I have discovered in the research we've done together is that it's not just burnout. There's actually, what we find with the measure is that we can get at least 5 major different experiences in the workplace. Burnout is the more extreme negative, but engagement is the more extreme positive. Okay, these are people who are having a low frequency of exhaustion, a low frequency of the cynicism, take this job and shove it, a low, not high frequency of feeling, what's wrong with me? I'm not handling this well. So it's not that they don't feel stress sometimes. Of course they do. Everybody does. But in a very different way. It's really whether it's chronic or not. And that's why World Health Organization has defined it, really as a response to chronic job stressors that have not been successfully managed. So the stress response, as I mean, it's normal. It's actually a healthy response. We all have it. All living creatures do. There's threats, there's challenges, and we go into gear mentally, physically, et cetera, to deal with it. And then we're supposed to recover from that. We're not supposed to be stressed all the time. I mean, that's not a normal baseline for our functioning, and it has health consequences, negative ones for us, if we're stressed all the time. And so that's why chronic job stressors are so critical, because they are there all the time. You're never getting away from them. At some point, you have to deal with them constantly. Even if you think you've coped or dealt with it and it's no longer a problem, you go back next week, it's there again, and you keep on dealing with that. That's the positive note there, they could be managed better. And that's really why we need to look at what's going on in the workplace and how do you make that a better fit with people so that they thrive in doing their work rather than get beaten down by those job, conditions. But the 5 profiles that Michael and I identified is the engagement on one end, burnout on the other, but in between, there's 3 more. And one is the overextended. These are the people who are exhausted, but they still love their job and they still think they're doing a good job. So they're not burned out, but they're overextended. They're tired, kind of thing. Or there are people who are doing fine in the job and like it, but somehow feel not that effective. They're not getting much positive feedback, no matter what they do, and so now they're really kind of questioning, am I right for this job or not? And then there's people who are not necessarily stressed at all, and they're feeling I'm perfectly fine, I can do this job, but the organization doesn't have a clue how to run this place and do it well. And that's where the cynicism, that negative, take this job and shove it mentality kind of comes from. So if you look at polls, and especially like global ones, I think Gallup did one in end of 22, that worldwide, that said that the percentage of workers globally who said they are engaged with their work had dropped from 30 to 20%. That means what? 80% of the workforce is less than thrilled with their job in different ways. It doesn't have to be just burnout, but they're also not doing as well or feeling as good or as proud about their work and wondering maybe going somewhere else or something like that. So for me, the problem sometimes is that just focusing on the extreme end of burnout, while that's, getting us what's going on and why is it happening, is sort of neglecting kind of the larger issue, which is, are our workplaces actually continually kind of improving to be good places that really support the kind of people who are doing the work we would like them to do. So I worry a little bit that the focus on burnout and making sure we know who is burned out means that we're not asking the question, why are they burned out? And that's the question where good answers will lead to much better ideas about how do we make a positive difference and really try and improve things.
Christina, I love how you talk about that continuum, right, from burnt out to engaged. Often we look at like how do we remove distress, remove burnout, but as you mentioned, there are positive aspects of work that can actually lead to people feeling more connected to work, more engaged, more productive, and then that can lead to high levels of well-being as well. And there's going to be a very nice tie into later today when we talk to Tony, Kat and Ange, regarding the integrated approach to workplace mental health, which very much looks at not just supporting those with ill health and prevention of harm, but also promoting the positive aspects of work that can have beneficial effects on people's well-being and drive greater engagement as a byproduct as well.
Right. Yeah. I mean, a rising tide can lift all boats, and so the fact that, you might be making improvements, in the sort of the match, between people and the workplace conditions, everybody could benefit from that, and why not? So I wouldn't restrict it just to people who are having the most problems.
So, Christina, in your opinion, what is the most misunderstood aspect of burnout?
Oh, great question, because there is a really clear problem there, and that is it's related to what I just said in some ways, and that is that people, no matter what the research has been saying for decades now, not just about job burnout, but occupational health and well-being, people keep assuming and treating burnout as though it is a personal weakness or disease or illness or, some personal functional problem. And when you focus and assume that that's what it is, then you're only coming up with individual solutions. What do we do about this person? How do we help them cope better? Do we send them off to a doctor? Do we give them a leave? Do we fire them and say, you're not good enough to be here? I mean, all of these kind of things are, how do we fix that person? And what we're not doing is actually looking at what are the causes, what's happening in the environment that is leading to that problem. So the why question, why are people so stressed and not recovering well? It's the recovery problem from the stress response that is that. And so we have a wealth of, huge self-care industry, all kinds of things, in terms of helping people cope, eat better, get more sleep, all these kind of things. And often when I hear people being told those things, be resilient, you just have to be stronger. You have to work harder. You can do it, da, 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 da. And people are saying, yeah. And if I didn't have to stay up all night to get the work done by, next morning, I could do that, but, not possible. So the biggest misunderstanding, I think, is really not realizing that it's not enough to simply focus on the individual. You have to look at what is the environment in which they are operating. And when you start doing that, you are looking at it not just as a individual me problem, but as a more socially shared we issue. and many of the solutions that actually will begin to modify the stressors or manage them more successfully or come up with better ideas for designing what our workplace processes are things that have to be shared. We all have to be on the same page in a way, to kind of get that done. And so we should be understanding that it's as much about the job as it is about the individual employees, and fixing the employee is not enough. Just to tell them to keep up and work harder and do all this thing. And if you can't take the heat, get out of the kitchen. It's your problem and you're to blame and you're responsible and only you can do something. And it's completely leaving off the hook, in a sense, various kinds of workplaces who just sort of say the job is what it is. Sorry, it's not going to change. You are going to have to, figure out how to do this. And as we know, workplaces can change. One thing we learned during the pandemic is we had to work differently. We didn't always come up with great solutions. Sometimes it worked well, sometimes disastrous. But let's learn from all of that and say, how could we, make this a better place for people to really grow and thrive and do well and feel proud of what they're doing. So that notion of a better fit between the workplace and the person is not a new concept. It's been around for a while, but we only really honor it in terms of mostly physically. Let's redesign the chairs so that people don't get, back problems. Let's redesign the workstation so you don't get carpal tunnel syndrome, et cetera, which makes sense. You adjust things to how the human body is built and operates. And what Michael and I have done in the book is really to say, but you also have to look at a better fit for psychology and the social aspect of our lives. And what motivates us, what makes us tick, what makes us, go the extra mile, what makes us feel pride, what makes us feel safe in the workplace. And so we can raise new ideas or, counter some, kind of thing. And so that's really what we're talking about, is as we think about how we get a better fit between people in their job, better relationship there, we have to look at those kinds of core needs as well: autonomy, belongingness, competence. We want to feel, as I said, psychologically safe. We want to feel we're treated fairly. We want to feel proud and have meaning, that is important for us in our work. So all of that is something that is we have found is critical for understanding what you do about burnout, and how you might begin to change the job, and not just one time, but as a regular checkup, continual improvement process. How are things going now? What could we do a little better around here? And the phrase "pebbles in your shoes," which was used in some papers on physician burnout, I think gets at the scale of the kind of modifications, the chronic job stressors there every day. They're often not big, huge ones. They're more minor ones, but they are irritating. They get in the way. They drag you from the important work to do something that's really not needed. So why are we doing this? Um, there is an acronym going around now called GROSS, which I've heard in my more recent visits. Get rid of stupid stuff. And it's a guideline to sort of say, what are we doing that is stupid, unnecessary, not needed? Could we redesign it? Could we eliminate it? Could we reduce how often we have to deal with it? There's a lot of different approaches to that kind of thing. But the competing mantra, which I still hear a lot, unfortunately, is what I call the burnout mantra. And that is, sorry, folks, we have to do more with less. We have more clients, we have more contracts, we have more this. We're not going to hire more people. We aren't going to replace. You're going to just have to add more to your plate and do more and be resilient, and then you'll be fine. And that's a really unhealthy, unproductive, not a good, kind of solution. It really has negative and harmful, consequences, on that. So we need to recognize that a lot of what is happening, The other mantra I should forget is burnout mantra number 2, and that is when a higher up, a boss, a manager, whoever, is telling employees that it would be really helpful and good for their career if they exhibited 24/7 availability. 24/7 availability is not a good thing for the employees at all. It means you do extra work. It means often unfairly you never get paid or recognized for that. And it completely disrupts your life, your personal life. It's not a sense that when workday is over, you go home and you're fine and you don't have to take work home. It means that whatever your days off, your weekend or whatever, might not be your days off. And so those kind of trends in the workplace are things that we really have to counter. And as long as we let them be and just say it's all up to the person to be resilient and strong and work harder, it's all your fault and all your responsibility, we're not going to make much progress on dealing with burnout at all.
There was a lot of gold in there, Christina. I saw a lot of people writing gross down after you said that, so that certainly resonated with a lot of people. We do love something simple and sort of sticky in the brain, so that's definitely a great one. And I think a lot of what you've talked about there resonates with the themes that we've heard from our different speakers yesterday as well, which is broadly around, reducing psychological harm through work. And that obviously ties in very strongly with burnout. And, the approach that we always advocate is change the work and things will improve for the worker. So that's certainly what I'm hearing from you there as well.
Yeah. And I think that's still the biggest challenge, because no matter where I go or people calling me, I want to know more about burnout. I'm writing an article about burnout, da, 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 da. And their first question is, can you give us some, coping strategies? As though, okay, it's my problem. And, and if I just cope better, I'll be fine. And that I'm responsible for coping better. And there's no responsibility on the other side to kind of create a better set of job conditions for us to get the job done well. People want to do a good job, and they want to be proud of it and feel like, yay, I'm happy to tell people what I'm doing these days. So, people will be there if you can try and make it a better environment.
So, Christina, you did reflect on the most important way to address burnout in the workplace is to focus on the work and not the worker. Is there any specific workplace interventions that you've seen that are more effective than others at getting to the root cause and really addressing burnout?
Not really in that sense, because what Michael and I have found over the years is that there's at least 6 different areas of the workplace, and the relationship with workers that can be important. And it'll vary in different organizations. It'll differ by different kinds of work. I mean, what's going to be maybe more effective in a hospital setting isn't going to be the one that you use in a tech company, which isn't the same as a financial, services in a bank or something like that, or teachers in a classroom. So the 6 areas give you several different lenses on which to look at where are things working well, relatively, fairly good fit, fairly good match, and where are things off kilter. And if possible, are there things in the areas where they're not working well that you can begin to tackle? So just to give some examples of that, in many organizations, there's a sense of they're recognizing that workload is an issue. And the mismatch there is that the demands are really high to get things done and by a certain deadline. And the resources to do that job are very low. So high demands, and you don't have enough time, you don't have enough people, you don't have the right materials or the, information you need, that kind of thing. But what Michael and I have discovered is that sometimes it's not just workload alone. It's like, how much control do you have over the workload? Can you make choices? Can you make decisions? Can you course correct when something comes up that you hadn't anticipated? So how much of that kind of control over the work is really critical. Third area is positive feedback or reward. It's not just salary and benefits. We find a lot of, is there any social recognition? did people realize what you've done? Do they pat you on the back? Do they thank you? Do they say, "Oh, that's really great. Could you come and talk to us? Handle that, client's family so well. I could learn from that." That kind of thing. Um, the workplace community. Who are the people who you have regular relationships, whose paths you cross? Is there trust? Is there support? Is there, a way of having civil discourse, of joking, of, having fun moments and so forth? Or is it what people call socially toxic? I dare not say anything that to anybody around me that says I'm less than 100% or haven't made a mistake or I'm wondering what to do, that I have people I can turn to, people can turn to me, that we help each other, that we work out differences and figure out how to get on the same page. So socially toxic, which we're hearing still a lot about, is really problematic because it takes away one of the basic things that people need, which is good relationships with other human beings, not just family, neighbors, etc., but in your work as well. Fifth area is fairness. It turns out being treated fairly, whatever the rules, whatever the policy, whatever the things are the right people getting rewarded, or recognized in some sense? Or is there discrimination, going on? Is glass ceilings, et cetera, which is a problem. Builds a lot of the cynicism, that negative reaction to the workplace. And finally, the sixth area is values. And here we're finding that people want to do something that is meaningful, that has purpose, that is they can be proud of what they've accomplished. And if you're working in a situation where there's ethical conflicts, you're being told not to do something because it would make the company look bad, or you're having moral injury in healthcare of having to do things that are just really painful and difficult to have to do. All of those kinds of things are really important. So when we start looking at those key areas, they're involving a lot of the social psychological fit, not just the physical one. And it's something that can be changed. We worked in one organization, and we give examples throughout the book, but one of them was that fairness turned out to be the big issue, which totally shocked the CEO. He thought it was going to be people complaining about workload or salary or something and rewards. And no, it was workload. I mean, it was fairness, sorry. And what he did, I have to applaud him for that. At first he was saying, well, maybe they need more money for the bonus check for doing something special. And we said, no, it was a fairness issue. The wrong people are getting that award for all kinds of reasons, like, I didn't get a promotion, I'll get you the Distinguished Service Award. Or the leader of a team who did the work got the award, and none of the people who actually did the work got it, and et cetera. And he set up a task force that really decided, how are we going to deal with this and come up with a better system? They finally did, and the whole company kind of got on board with a more fair process to recognize and reward people who had really done something over and above, something really special. And when we went back, because we were doing longitudinal research the following year, the fairness issue wasn't a big issue anymore. And what is important there is he made it a collaborative process. It wasn't just him as CEO trying to figure out what the hell to do here, and do it. But he got people opinion and different ideas and different perspectives of what would be fair. How would you do it the right way, in a way that people would feel good about whoever got the award? It was a collaborative process. They customized it. They made it something special for their organization that really worked for them, rather than just taking something else and bringing it in off the shelf, kind of thing as a solution. And they committed to work at it and make sure to do any course corrections until they got it right. And everybody said, yes, this is the way to do it. And the other thing that happened, as an example, if I can just add one more point, is that when you begin to fix one of these pebbles in the shoe, this wasn't the biggest thing in the world, but it mattered that it was so unfair. People didn't want to be known as being nominated for the award. But to make it better, it built hope. People started saying, well, wow, if we could fix that, hey, we could fix that thing over there. And that company actually every year after that had a regular annual thing where they would say, okay, what are we going to fix and improve this year? What's the thing on the table that we could do something about? And made it an annual, let's check and see if everything is fine. Don't need to do anything. Don't mess with it. But it's a regular checking and saying, what could we do better? And let's make it a better place for us.
That was a fantastic example. One of the things that we hear people attending the conference are wanting time and time again is, how do we do this? Let's stop talking about the issues. We understand there's an issue. What do we do about it? And what you just explained there step by step was a really great evidence-based approach to dealing with it, very like evidence-based practice. I want to shout out a good friend of ours, Dave Burrows, who spoke yesterday at the conference. He'll regularly call out people who have great solutions to a problem they don't understand. There's lots of vendors out there that says, I've got the silver bullet, or I've got a intervention for you for burnout. But what I think you so eloquently described there was, you really need to understand the issue first. And often the issue you think it is, it's not. You really have to, once you identify the root cause though, it's so powerful what you can do. And sometimes the intervention is very small and a lot smaller and maybe less costly than what a lot of people think if you really understand the issue.
Yeah. No, I think that's a great point. I mean, I can't tell you how often I have gone into organizations and interviewed people in the C-suite and also interviewed employees at various levels. And there will be something that has been done. And I have to say, they often do it with the best of intentions. This will be a great thing for our people. But they haven't ever talked to their people to find out if everybody agrees. So, putting a volleyball court on the roof of the building without checking whether everybody thought that would be a great thing to do cost a huge amount of money to fix the roof and all of it. People were thinking, oh my God, you could have spent that money on these other things that really would have made a difference. They don't have the time to get everybody together and play volleyball and, that kind of thing. So sometimes the intentions are there. They want to do something, but they're not doing the simple things in some sense of, you collaborate, you get input from different people, the people who have to implement it, the people who have to live with it, and make sure that maybe they know something that you don't, that could, turn this whole thing, sideways and not make it work well. So it has to be more of a we process rather than simply, just an individual one.
Yeah, and look, I think it's, some people say in Australia, because we have new regulations that point to an existing obligation that, we should have work that does not harm people. And as part of that, now that it's a workplace health and safety, a very clear workplace health and safety obligation, there is a duty to consult with workers about their experience of work. Some people would say that's onerous or it's regulator overreach, but it's just good practice. It can actually save companies a lot of heartache and make work a better place for everyone.
So, Christina, I'm interested in whether you've observed any cultural differences around the world in terms of how people experience and manage burnout.
Can't say that I have, gotten a lot of evidence, on that in some ways, but I can give you a couple of different cultural examples, which are actually older, but related, to this. And one is, I first heard about this 50, 60 years ago. And in Japan, they started talking about karoshi. And when I was asking them, what is, karoshi, it's death from overwork. So unlike saying people are dying because of cardiovascular problems, which was really what was happening, young men were dying in their 40s from heart attacks. The Japanese had a way of framing it in a term that sort of got at what's causing it. It's the overwork. So these were men at this time. Virtually all men were working and women weren't. But since then, we've been seeing this happening to women employees as well. But it's like, okay, it's you cannot go home until your boss does. You have to stay at work and take clients out and entertain them until late hours in the morning. You turn into this couch potato whenever you get home, and you're not really there for your family, and all of these kind of things. And we're seeing the early deaths on that. So I think that there was, again, sort of a different recognition. They came up with another term more recently, which was suicide from overwork, and because they were getting problems with tech workers on this, committing suicide at early ages. A different example, but one I think is relevant, is burnout in Sweden. And almost 20 years ago, maybe a little less, 15, 20 years ago, I and a number of other people working on job burnout in different countries were invited to come to Sweden because they were really concerned about people who were going out on long-term sick leave. And they wondered if this was burnout and what should they be doing about it. And in Sweden at that time, what they had was a social insurance system for all workers in Sweden. And if you were injured or had some sort of health issue, that disability kind of thing, and diagnosed as having this problem, you would be taken out of your job. You would be paid your salary for a year and a half. You would be getting therapy or treatment for whatever the health problem was. And then after a year and a half, when you're all better and everything is, you could go back to your job. They would, make sure that you could have the same kind of work. And so what they were seeing was suddenly a high, steep increase in the number of people going out on this sick leave, particularly from healthcare and particularly from burgeoning tech industries. And it was kind of like, what is happening here? Why are all these people suddenly, going out on the system, which now has to provide all of this? And so we were asked to meet with psychiatrists and doctors and look at the data. I mean, Sweden has an incredible system of keeping data for, decades. So we could look back at it and ask questions about the data. And what we were finding was that they were really concerned that about 2/3 of this huge increase in the population going out were diagnosed as having severe clinical depression, work-related only. So they thought, this is burnout. And as we looked at the data and talked with them about it, we essentially, I think, were saying, we think burnout was the experience that came first. And now they are so, they can't cope with it, they're not dealing with it. They're so depressed that it's a clinical problem that really needs attention from a psychiatrist. So giving them treatment is fine. And then a second thing happened, which I thought was really enlightening for me. And that was we would have breaks in the meetings periodically. And so at one break, I was going out to walk around, and see the canals and fresh air and, that kind of thing in Stockholm. And I noticed a group of people following me. When I went this way, they went that way, and they were coming, down. And after a while, I stopped at a bridge and I turned around, and they sort of came up and say, "Are you one of those people in the newspaper who's dealing with burnout and the people who are going off work?" And I said, "Yes, I am," because I guess they'd seen my picture or my name or something like that. And they said, "We are some of those people." And I thought, "Oh, okay." And they said, "Can we talk with you for a little bit?" So we chatted, and so I was asking them about this benefit that the country gives them, that they've been diagnosed as having a major health problem. They're going to be provided treatment. They are going to provide their salary so that they can continue to live and raise their family and whatever. And then they are going to get their job back when they're, feeling better and past all of this. And they all said, "That's the problem. We don't want to go back to that job. And if that is a price we have to pay, we don't want to take the pay and the therapy and stuff like that. We'll do something else." And that, again, was a big clue to me at that time that we were not paying enough attention to the job. They were pretty adamant about it, whether it was in healthcare or whether it was in tech, that was not viewed as a positive thing. That was viewed as actually the problem and why I am in the state I'm in right now. So it was interesting to sort of bring back that conversation, to the discussion in Sweden on that, and really pointing out that there's more complexity to this burnout kind of thing and people leaving the job and not doing well. and how best can we, fix this and support people to come back and do the work.
Thanks, Christina. Those are definitely interesting insights from different areas of the world. And I was just in that last example reflecting on here in Australia, we get sort of statistics on workers' compensation claims, and what we're seeing is that claims for psychological injury tend to last a lot longer. So it takes a lot longer for them to resolve than physical injury claims, and that there's a lot of, I guess, discussion and debate about why that's the case, and lots of people kind of going, well, why? Why is that the case? And I think anecdotally, a big part of it is that the person can be recovered, but their treating team don't want to send them back to work if nothing in the workplace has changed. If those same problems are there, they're still working with that person that was bullying them horrendously, or the nature of the job hasn't changed, and once they're in there, it's all just going to happen all over again. So a large part of it is employers either not knowing how to change work for these people, or not being willing to, I suppose.
Deal with the bullies. In some, yeah. No, but I was going to say that often I'm hearing people say, oh, well, the thing that we need to do for burnout is we'll just shut the company down for a week. Everybody will take a vacation and we'll come back, right? And burnout will be gone. We won't have a problem anymore. And right. And they're asking me, and I'm saying, if you have the same chronic job stressors as before, that vacation will be a little respite, but it doesn't last. It'll come back. The problem could come back. And so that's not, think about it. It's a solution which is, there are many, many coping strategies out there, which all have one thing in common, which is don't go to work, stay away from work. Which begs the question, what is it about work that the best way to cope is not to go in? Take a day off, take a vacation, reduce your hours, all that kind of thing. So just being away is not enough, to actually cure the problem.
Christina, I'm going to ask our chair to come and give me the iPad, please, when she's finished her lippy. And then we've got some questions from the audience. Just maybe in 1 minute or less, while I look at the questions that are available to ask you. What's next for you?
Next for me?
Yes, we understand people like yourself are incredibly busy, and it's a huge sign of disrespect to go, well, now that you've spent all this time doing this thing, what are you going to do next?
Congratulations, you just wrote a book. What are you doing next?
Yeah, I know. Well, as I said, my goal really is to find ways and more ways of connecting with people to get the message out about better understanding of what we need to do to make workplaces healthier, better, for the people who work in them and so forth. So I will sort of continue that, but, I'm also spending more time with my latest grandchild and, doing all that kind of stuff. I'd like to get back to some travel at some point, which I haven't been able to do for a while. And I have this other project, which I'd like to get back to, which is the women faculty, and their experiences in higher ed. So there's a lot still, that I could do, but I do want to spend time just having fun and then relaxing and having not stressed, so yeah.
Well, Christina, I reckon if you wanted to do a speaking tour around Australia and put a bit of travel in, I believe Michael Light is going to be doing that later this year, coming over for a couple of months. I reckon there's a number of companies here that would pay a premium to hear you speak to their execs, I feel. So that could be a good way to fund your next holiday.
Okay. I'll keep that in mind. Thank you.
Yeah, just reach out. I'll put you in touch. So I'll take it to some questions now from the audience. So where would you suggest the focus should be as practitioners continue to translate what we know from burnout research into workplaces?
I think it's a good question. And I think one of the challenges is to figure out ways to move from a more individual focused approach to a more collaborative small group team, kind of approach, because that's, as I mentioned before, that's really one of the big barriers and hurdles, because we need to be able to reframe the question of what do we do about you, or how can we help you, or how can you help yourself, um, to what could we do around here to make things a little bit better, and trying to reframe it so that we're actually taking some other kinds of actions rather than um, always pointing the finger at an individual, and saying over and over and over again. And people say, I am so sick of resilience. Is there anything else out there besides being resilient, that would help? So, coming up with, I mean, when I give talks, I routinely ask at the end, if you've had any experience with something that worked well, please send me, a little email or letter or something and let me know about it. If you did something that was not good, and really, I appreciate hearing about that too, so I can pass that on, in some ways. We don't have a good way of sharing successes and failures in this regard. A lot of organizations are pretty close-mouthed about it, and they still do individual performance reviews and individual, sessions and stuff like that. And I think we need to really move towards what we all know from tons of research, is that there is a lot more that is shared, and having this people together trying to figure out and implement something that will actually improve their time at that job would be great.
Thanks for that, Christina. So the next question from the audience is, what do you dislike about how burnout is seen today by society? What would you love people to stop saying about it?
Oh my gosh. Well, it's a similar kind of thing to what I've been saying before, is that it tends to very much blame the person, and people who, whether or not they feel they're experiencing burnout, or are accused of being burned out, or worry about being burned out, are all kind of, muddling through and afraid to reach out and talk to anybody and get some help or advice. So I think all those kind of things that come up with, let's make an app that allows you to decide if you are burned out at any one moment, and let's, it's something you wear, and it's tracking something, with your physical symptoms, and, you can self-diagnose, you're treating it like this illness again. And it's still that blaming, and not giving people any guidance as to what they could actually do that would be helpful, because some of that involves more than just me and myself. But when I talk about the sort of the blame game that's going on, the stigma that's still attached to it, this is where all the head nodding is going on all the time and saying, yeah, we've had that. So how to sort of change the nature of that conversation, to a more productive, positive, we could get better. We have to, and we should. And it's not just one person at a time necessarily, but there's a lot of us, and we could come up with some better things about the place where we work. And if not, people will quit and leave. I mean, we have examples of that in the book as well, just saying, I'll take a pay cut. I'll go to another place where the values are better, because right now I don't want to be a doctor or a surgeon or something in this kind of healthcare setting. In fact, there is one example where when I asked for people to send me ideas and things like that, and I think I mentioned in the book, there was a healthcare group that said by accident, again, they discovered that they could have their initial intake sessions in the morning change so that they could actually work together more effectively as a team and deal with any kind of things that came up, like somebody had a sick child and, wanted to go home early, and how would they cover and all that kind of thing. So I think people, whether by accident or by design, can come up with, we could do this a little better, and in many cases you can do it under the radar of the top management, and you don't always have to spend a lot of money, but you can kind of figure out, how could we do this in another way? How could we get rid of the stupid stuff? How could we redesign some of these things? How could we use technology effectively rather than making it ruin our lives? So there's infinite possibilities for creativity and innovation if you give people a chance to really work on that and get something done.
Terrific response, and the whole day's been terrific responses to these questions. I've got two questions remaining that I want to ask you, and I'm going to have to ask you for brief responses,
Okay.
please.
Yes. Sorry.
Okay. No, that's all right. No, it's amazing. So, first of all, how might managers and staff address burnout in the workplace when the views of senior leadership is that the worker's experience is a rite of passage?
Oh my God. Yeah. A rite of passage. Yeah. A quick answer to that. Um, I, I don't know how to dismantle the rite of passage. There is this notion out there that you have to have pain before you have any pleasure or something, and you have to go through all of this. And you know what? It may be a belief and people tout it, but there's really no good evidence to support that. And I'm a big believer in, can we go with evidence of what we know works and is helpful? So, a rite of passage should be, how do we make this, a regular part of our lives, to check up periodically and figure out how we could improve things. And that's the value that we should be actually walking the talk there, but all the stuff about reality shock and rite of passage and all of that kind of thing, I honestly don't know of good evidence to support that that's actually a good thing to do. You don't trust your people at all if you believe that.
True. Thanks, Christina. Actually, there are still two more questions because there's a short one. I'm hoping, a very short answer you can give to the next one. I'm actually very curious about question two that's remaining. But we have a lot of people who work in academia in the building today. And there is a question, and we do actually have a panel coming up after our morning tea break on psych health and safety in academia. So this person wrote, "Burnout in academia, exclamation mark. I'd love to hear your insights for supporting staff working in higher education where burnout is on the rise."
Uh, Read our book, because I have academic examples there, and I talk about it in more detail, and that would be the easiest way to learn a lot about what could be done.
That's a very concise answer. And fortunately, most people in the room have the book. And thank you again, Christina, for signing all of them as
Sure.
well.
Yeah.
So appreciate
Okay.
it. Okay, so the curiosity in me, I have to ask this question. So someone said that they once heard a story that you regretted the term burnout and wish you could have called it something else. What was the alternate term, and why was it more fitting, do you believe?
I never came up with something that was more fitting. I mean, I think I stuck with burnout because that was the thing that people really responded to, that they started using and talking about it. It became a common kind of thing. And it was really sort of the language of the people, and this is what they're calling it. And we'll work with that. Um, but the downside has been that it can be, as I said, used for all kinds of other things. So it shares in some ways the problem that we find with stress. I mean, if you think about it, people can define everything as being stressful. There's good stress, there's bad stress, there's, all these kinds of things. And so what is not stress when you stretch that definition so broadly? And I think a similar thing has happened with burnout. There are other related terms, like job stress, but I don't think, given that problem would still exist, with that kind of concept. And the ones that I was trying to find from all the literature at the time didn't resonate with people in terms of their experience. I mean, it might be part of it, but not the whole thing. So I never came up with a better term, and just stuck with how I was talking with people and what they were telling me on that. And I don't, in a sense, regret that in the long term, but it does mean that there has been some challenges sometimes with that. I think it's still sort of really the problem of trying to indicate that there's lots of things that we respond to that are stressors, and we have a stress response. And what's different about burnout is it has a stress response, yes, the exhaustion, But the important thing for me is really the cynicism, that negative, take that job, shove it thing, because it means that people then are no longer doing their very best. They're doing the bare minimum. The quality of their work, of the service, the teaching, the care, the, productivity, the new invention, whatever, is not going to be so good for all the rest of us who are recipients, in some ways of that. And so for me, that's really the hallmark of burnout. Not that you're just feeling stress. You're stressed. You're beginning to really dislike the job, minimize your contact with it. How do I get through, still get my paycheck and still make still live? And then it can have that negative effect. The third component is I'm feeling not so good about me. Why can't I take it? What's the matter here? Maybe I should have opened a pet store in my hometown instead, because, and certainly for some occupations where perfectionism becomes really part of the message in the training, like in healthcare for physicians, anything less than perfect can be really more devastating, and that adds again to the burnout and the risk of other health problems, mental health problems down the road. So I guess I wouldn't change it.
Burnout it is then. Right?
If there's a better word, I would really love to know what it is, but that's the one that really has worked the best as I've
and it
worked
sounds
with
like
people.
it from the whole story that you've shared with us today, and definitely it's been picked up obviously around the world and like you say, it resonates well with in popular culture and in more direct to consumer style publications as well. So I think you you nailed it first time, Christina, with the term. So look, we're getting to the end of our podcast recording now, right? And there's a question we like to ask all of our guests. We asked the same question of Michael yesterday. So what are your hopes for the future of workplace mental health?
I would say the biggest hope I have is that goal that I'm trying to continue to contribute to, which is how to translate what we know and what we think is helpful and really works into actual interventions, actual practice, actual change and improvements. I mean, to do more and more research and just have more and more, in the journals and people understand it and so forth, but we can't make it active, and can't make it useful. It's just going to sort of gather dust, in the libraries and so forth. And I really have always had that sense of why we do research, among other things, is not just to get more knowledge and so forth, but to actually give it away, figuring out a way that all of this knowledge, this insight, these good ideas or whatever that seem to stand the test of time are given away so they to the everybody else, so that it really makes societies better, makes the world a little bit better. You want to, all of us only have so much time on this planet, and I think we all want to feel that we've done something that has been helpful, that has big, small, changed somebody's life, made things start off better, so you feel proud and you feel good that you've been able to do that. So it's still that implementation, kind of issue of making the knowledge live and useful, and we can actually follow this and take this and do something that makes things a little bit better for us right now.
Yeah, thanks, Christina. I think a lot of people resonate with that. They're looking for how do we actually do something about this. So, thank you for your work in this space and translating that so well.
Okay, Christina, one last question for you, and then we will let you go. Do you have any words of advice for people who want to work in the field of workplace mental health?
The advice that I would give, I think, is something I sort of referred to earlier, which is to be able to bring in more of a shared we perspective on this, and really realizing the importance of social relationships and the relationships you have with other people. When I have talked and interviewed lots of people on issues around job burnout, and I've often asked, if you could change something, if something could happen that would be different, what would you want? What would be a good thing to do? And more often than not, the number one answer has been, I wish I had a mentor. I wish I had a safe harbor. I wish I had somebody or one or two people that I could go to and get advice and help. They wouldn't blab everything to everybody else. It would be a way in which we could, I could get support and help. I would learn, and I would be doing the same thing for other people. I used to have a mentor when I was in training, when I was in school, internship or whatever. And now I don't know where to go. And that safe harbor, that safe other person or people who can really be important for you at different points, just comes up over and over again. And I cannot tell you how many people also say, I'm surrounded by lots of other people and I feel so alone because I don't know who to turn to or who I could go to safely to, do all of this kind of thing. And this really got underscored for me a number of years ago when we were seeing a number of suicides among young people in technology. So these were people who were doing startups. They were coming up with some brilliant idea and then taking their own life in their 30s, late 20s and so forth. It was like, what's going on? And some leading figure in the field was so distressed when he had heard about the most recent one, because he had met this young man and thought he was, like the second coming, the brilliant, guy. And, saying, why did he not reach out? I would have traveled around the world to be with him and to do something and say, no, we can get through this and go there. And he wrote this impassioned thing about reach out for someone to, help you when you're feeling, these suicidal tendencies, or you're feeling depressed, or you're feeling down and you don't know what to do and you don't know how to manage the job. Reach out to somebody else. And then, so that was the message that came out at this conference I was at. And there was this dead silence. And then all these hands started going up and people saying, great advice, but you know what? I've tried that. And you know what happened? People would say, oh, bummer. You're not, doing this job so well. See if you can fix yourselves up. And when you're feeling better, let me know. We'll have a beer, not helpful at all. Not, and then sort of like, I'm at risk of being thrown under the bus by this guy who thinks I'm not so good. I'm not 100%. And so this whole plea of, being able to have other people that you can trust and we support each other and so forth is getting shredded by a lot of this kind of go, hustle culture, kind of thing. And we need to bring that back. We know from tons of work that some of the best thing for mental wellness is somebody else, is other people. And how do we, kind of support and build those kind of ties so that people get to know each other, know who they can trust, who they can go to, reach out to help the new person who's struggling a little bit. I mean, that kind of, I can't really say social network anymore, but, that kind of social kind of support and trust, I think, is just essential. And we need to find ways to really support that and bring that back in, because too many people are lonely and not knowing where to go and what to do, even in the midst of many people.
So lots of food for thought there, Christina. And I think, I saw that really resonating with probably everybody that I looked at while you were talking there. So thank you so much for that.
Christina, thank you again for your decades of work in this space. I know, when, we think about some of the key research that underpins the work that we do, obviously your work is at the top of the pile. So thank you for that, and thank you for your generosity today and sharing with everyone who's attending our conference, both in person and virtually, for answering those questions, and for a bit of carpal tunnel with signing all those books as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you. It was a lot of fun. I appreciate it.
Take care, Christina.
You've been listening to the Psych Health and Safety podcast. To stay up to date with the latest on psychological injury prevention, follow Flourish DX on LinkedIn and subscribe to the Psych Health and Safety podcast at www.psychealthandsafety.com.